The Detroit Lions are still the kings of the NFC North, ending the Minnesota Vikings' undefeated season. That and more on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready. Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today as I am every Monday by Locked On NFL expert Gino Camilleri. On today's episode, Russell Wilson cooks Aaron Rodgers on Sunday Night Football. The Kansas City Chiefs are the only undefeated team left in the NFL, and the NFC North gets even more competitive. Before we dive into it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked on to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. The Detroit Lions, despite losing Aiden Hutchinson, go into Minnesota and end the Minnesota Vikings' undefeated season. The Lions are still king of the NFC North, Gino.
I told you last week, Tyler, I thought that this Lions team had a little bit something extra to them, and I think today goes to show you exactly that. And I think the ultimate cherry on top of the cake was at the end of the game, Minnesota has a strip fumble that they run back and basically ice the game. No, this Detroit Lions team, Dan Campbell, he said it in their locker room meeting after the game last week that he's been on teams that have connected in the past. This team is different, and it really does feel that way. The NFC, they're running it right now. It goes through the North as good as that division is, and I think this thing is going to run through Ford Field.
And I think another cherry on top, the Lions deserve two cherries on their Sunday, no pun intended, is the play of Jared Goff.
Unreal.
What an incredible performance against this Vikings defense. And Matt Derry from Locked On Lions talked about how impressive it was.
If there's anybody left that doesn't like Jared Goff or doesn't think Jared Goff is the future here at quarterback, then you need to have your head examined. Oh, the blitzing Brian Flores, the blitz master. Jared Goff's like, bring it. Every look the Vikings had, you watch Goff at the line of scrimmage, checking, making adjustments, quick passes, changing the play to a run. He was phenomenal today. Jared Goff was the reason the Lions won. Yes, Jake Bates kicked well, and Dan Campbell had them ready, and the defense hung in there. And Jared Goff went 22 out of 25 for 280, 2 touchdowns, and a passer rating of 140. There have been like 4 quarterbacks in the history of the game that have had 3 consecutive games of a passer rating of above 140.
That's just outrageous. And you look, Goff was blitzed by Brian Flores. 58% of his dropbacks. He was 14 for 16, 150 yards and a touchdown on those plays. Like, he was just absolutely unreal. And I saw another stat somewhere that Brian Flores' Minnesota Vikings defense has only allowed a team to score 30 plus points like 4 times, and 3 of them are the Detroit Lions. Ben Johnson, Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, who will be a head coach, has to be a head coach after this next offseason. He just has the answers for Brian Flores that no one else in the NFL has had all year.
When you look at this Detroit Lions team, I think Jared Goff can be summed up in one way, and it's especially on brand with the MLB playoffs going on right now. He's the ace. He has been delivering 8 to 9 strikeout innings, going nearly perfect in 3 consecutive games at this point.
Yes.
He has been phenomenal. And Matt Derry said it. If you don't believe that this guy is the present and the future, how much longer can he continue to play at this level if he continues to take care of the football, doesn't take bad hits, which he has gotten out of that habit since he's left the Rams. He's a new rejuvenated quarterback. This Jared Goff, the sky is the limit when you have a defense that's performing at this level, and he is as efficient as he is right now. Look at the Chiefs. They're undefeated, but Pat Mahomes is a turnover machine. If push comes to shove in a big game, let's say the Super Bowl, at least you know Jared Goff is going to protect the football because that's what he's done consistently all season long.
Yeah, and right now with the way offenses are playing and the way quarterback play is right now in the NFL, just protecting the football and being efficient is so huge. So that's a great point. 31-29. The Lions beat the Vikings. Both teams sit at 5-1, but now the Lions have control of that division. But don't look now. The Green Bay Packers, 5-2. They beat the Houston Texans 24-22. And my guy Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers broke down the win.
This is a story about defense. The first completion for a conversion on third down was late in the fourth quarter. Now, it was the third down conversion, but it was their first of the game, the Houston Texans. The Packers had absolutely beguiled, just bewildered and battered and bruised CJ Stroud. He finishes this game 10 of 21 for 86 yards. The Houston Texans offense held to 3.4 yards per play, 4 of 13 on third down, under 200 total yards of offense. If not for 3 turnovers, this is an ass kicking.
You know what I love about Peter is he's going to give you beguiled and bewildered and all that, and then finish with that last line right there. He's really a daywalker in that sense. But I think the Packers are a team that's just revving up. I mean, they have elite potential. They were my Super Bowl pick for the NFC. I think they have the potential to do that, especially if they want to be buyers at the trade deadline and add a little bit. But I will say, Gino, the Achilles heel for the Packers is those turnovers. And they've been good enough to fight through that and still find ways to win. But we saw last year against San Francisco in a big moment, Jordan Love made a turnover that killed the team. And while I'm high on the Packers, obviously, I'm not certain that issue is behind them. I think that could still creep up in a big moment.
No, I'm 100% with you. And the guy we were just talking about in Jared Goff, his non-Achilles heel is not turning the ball over. And you look at what the Packers, their issue is having to fight uphill, right? Because if you look at it on paper, holding a guy like CJ Stroud to 86 yards, this shouldn't have even been a game when you look at it. If you're just going to look at it in the box score, you're saying the Packers kicked the crap out of this football team. But those turnovers in the NFL at a level this high, this is where teams will make you pay. But I will say the one saving grace that I don't think other Packers teams have had in the past, Jeff Hafley, hats off to him in getting that defense ready to go time and time and time again. You talk about Houston not converting a big third down until the fourth quarter. So much of that has to do with Jeff Hafley and getting that defense in a position to succeed. And Jair Alexander just getting in the ear of Stephon Diggs and riling things up before that game is always good for football. 100%.
I love Stephon Diggs in the locker room after. He said, I'll never be the bigger person. I don't let anything go. I mean, credit for the self-awareness. Yeah, I love that right there. And Hafley's defense, while it's had its struggles, has been excellent in the second half of games for the last few weeks. So he definitely deserves his credit there. But the only undefeated team left in the NFL is still the Kansas City Chiefs. And somehow, despite playing not so great football, if we're honest, they just continue to pull out victory after victory. We're going to talk about that. A great Sunday night football game where Russell Wilson was absolutely cooking. A lot to discuss. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp Online Therapy. So what's something that scares you? For me, I got to be honest, I'm scared of horror movies. I don't like them. And it's Halloween. Now, Halloween lets us have fun with the things that scare us. But what about those fears that don't necessarily involve zombies and ghosts? Therapy can be a great tool for facing your fears and helping you find ways to overcome them, because the scariest thing sometimes is not facing our fears in the first place. I've enjoyed my experience with BetterHelp. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you could switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. All right, Gino, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, breaking down an awesome Week 7 Sunday in the NFL season. We talked about the teams in the NFC North, the battle between the Lions and Vikings, the Green Bay Packers and the Houston Texans, probably the two best games of the week. And as we were talking before we hopped on here, maybe two of the best football games of the entire season. Now, a game that wasn't quite as good as those games was the Kansas City Chiefs knocking off the San Francisco 49ers 28-18. And my guy Chris Clark from Locked On Chiefs talked about the ugly win.
And the Kansas City Chiefs moved to 6-0 on the season. They are the only undefeated team in the NFL. They beat the 49ers 28-18. They actually beat a team by more than 2 scores. This game really wasn't that close, and honestly, it shouldn't have been as close as it was at the very end. 49ers did get a score late in the game to get within 2 scores. But you look at this game and you look at what it means for Kansas City. They moved to 6-0 on the season. They have another injury with Juju Smith-Schuster. He missed most of the game after starting, and they thought he'd be able to play through it, but he came back with a hamstring injury. Worthy went out for a little bit. He came back and played and finished the game. They lost Jalen Watson during this game, and it sounds like it's a pretty bad injury. He was leaving on crutches, so that's going to be something to monitor. But the Chiefs are moving to 6-0 on the season, and they are the last undefeated team in the NFL as they go for a three-peat.
Look, to me, this is the difference between a player of Patrick Mahomes' caliber and then Brock Purdy. Patrick Mahomes has no wide receivers. They're all gone. They're all hurt. They're all out. Travis Kelce's still there, but come on. I think we can all admit Kelce's taken a step back this year. He's 35 years old. And then you look at Brock Purdy. He doesn't have Brandon Ayuk, who looks like a pretty bad injury, maybe an ACL tear for Brandon Ayuk there is what the initial reports are. Deebo Samuel doesn't play in the game after trying to warm up. Juwan Jennings out of the game. Christian McCaffrey out of the game. And look, that's a tough scenario for any quarterback. But Brock Purdy melted with 3 turnovers. One of them maybe is not his fault, but 3 interceptions, all of them within the 40-yard line of 49 or Chiefs territory. So this was a game where it's like, hey, Patrick Mahomes, without much help around him, still going to get the job done. And he did it with his legs, man. The run down the sideline for 40 yards, trucking the rookie Mustafa in the end zone. Like, Patrick Mahomes put this team on his back today, with help from the defense, of course. But to me, it just showcases like, hey, Brock Purdy is a good conductor of a good offense, but he's nowhere near the elite level of a guy like Patrick Mahomes. And to me, that'll always be the difference with these teams.
The thing about Patrick Mahomes is he truly encapsulates the idea of rising tides lifts all boats. And not many quarterbacks right now Right
Yeah.
now, there are guys that are paid like they are, but I would say performing like they are, there's maybe one or two. There's probably Patrick Mahomes and
Lamar
Josh
Jackson,
Allen and Lamar.
Josh Allen,
Yeah.
Joe Burrow, I would put in there as well. But that is like it for me.
Yes, exactly. And you talk about the guys that are going to get paid like that. Brock Purdy's going to get paid like the rest of these guys. But is he in that category? That has always been the question. And if you look at it today in this type of matchup, that's exactly what happened. Purdy, he laid an egg. It's tough to win in that type of game, but it's no excuse when the guy across the ball is handing the ball off to Mecole Hardman on a jet sweep to try and scour up some points. And he's a guy that's going to the sideline and making guys miss one-on-one, doing these extraordinary things that aren't usually in the Mahomes game plan. When push comes to shove, he finds a way to get it done. And when you walk away from a game saying, how can't we stop this guy? That's exactly what one of those generational players is. And that's Patrick Mahomes. That's the difference. And that's why they're 6-0 for yet another season in a row, even when they're at 50 to 60% of what they have been in the last couple of seasons. What's going to happen if they go and acquire a wide receiver at the deadline?
DeAndre Hopkins. Please,
you want
DeAndre Hopkins.
Yes,
please.
You want a 2 or a 3 coming your way from Kansas City. That would be great. But what happens when Spagnuolo just all of a sudden gets this defense back to where it was today, and he can sustain that over multiple weeks, and Patrick Mahomes doesn't turn the ball over? Like, that's going to happen. That's going to come. If you wanted to get your shots in on the Chiefs, these last couple weeks were it. I don't think it's going to get easier for teams playing them coming up.
Yeah, it's not like Patrick Mahomes is going to start playing worse. And for me, it's just the backbreaking feeling of we've covered everything. He doesn't have weapons. We're getting pressure. And then all of a sudden it's a reminder of, oh, this guy may be the most talented passer of all time, but he still has mobility. It's like, it's just unbelievable, you know? And Tom Brady mentioned it on the broadcast. And of course, if the Titans didn't need more dirt on top of their grave, Patrick Mahomes in the first championship year, the Titans have them down in the first half, and Mahomes runs for about 40 yards down the sideline, beats Rashaan Evans, and sets the game on a totally different path. It's just that, hey, we got everything figured out, and you still find a way to beat us. It's why he's one of the top 3 quarterbacks in NFL history already. But I do want to switch gears. A 28-3 victory for the Philadelphia Eagles. Gino, last week, not on our show, but I talked about how the Eagles, to me, outside of the NFC North teams, are still one of the scariest teams that you can imagine outside of that NFC North, because they have such good top-level players. And in a game where Jalen Hurts didn't really, have gaudy numbers, but Saquon Barkley, 176 yards, A.J. Brown, 89 yards and a touchdown. Like, this team just has studs at the end of the day. What was your take watching your team dominate the New York Giants?
Sometimes really good players make really good plays, and it's tough to defend them. And I think you hit it right on the head. The Eagles are a team that has some incredible top-end talent. And I walked out of that game saying, if they can establish the run like they did today, down 2 of their starting offensive linemen, and run the ball for nearly they did run for over 200 yards if you combine Kenny Gainwell in there as well. Saquon Barkley is being paid $12.5 million to put out value worth of $25 million, like a Justin Jefferson or like an A.J. Brown who's getting paid $30 million. That is their identity. That's been the identity since the Super Bowl season in 2017. And I would just love to have been a fly on the wall in the suite with Mr. Mara to hear what he had to say about Saquon's revenge game. Because I don't know what it is in the NFL, but how do these teams allow other players, especially in the NFC North, it happens all the time, players to just go to a rival team, especially of the caliber of Saquon Barkley? It makes no sense at all. But even if Jalen Hurts doesn't produce in the air, their defense is figuring it out. They have 8 sacks on the day. Vic Fangio has gotten that defense in line. But they have some unbelievable fastballs in A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley. That when you talk about those guys that we have everything covered perfectly and they still make a play, they fall right into that category. And heck, man, feels good to have number 26 on your team and not trying to tackle them each and every week.
Yeah, 100% after seeing him for so long. But that is why I said, like, outside of that NFC North, the Eagles, man, because even if their coaching isn't great and Sirianni isn't the best guy ever and Kellen Moore isn't this, like, they just have guys that'll still just go out
They
there.
got dudes. They got
Yeah,
dudes.
they got
Like, that's
dudes,
what it is.
100%. And at the end of the day, in this kind of weird NFL season where offenses really aren't playing at the level that we've seen recently, it's starting to come back, but it still doesn't feel like, the way that it did 5 years ago. That might be enough to win you a playoff game in a big spot. It just might. But with that being said, speaking of dudes making plays, George Pickens is back alive because Russell Wilson is back out on the field. We're going to talk about the Jets falling apart and the Steelers letting Russ cook. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL fans, you can start the second quarter of the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can go to FanDuel, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. And right now, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Look, wasn't as good of a week last week as last week for me with the FanDuel Friday bet. Still hit about 50% of them, though, which is a pretty good clip. And I'm telling you, the Baltimore Ravens -3.5 on Monday Night Football is something that you need to consider. So make sure that you head to America's #1 sportsbook. It's FanDuel. Check out FanDuel.com. All right, Gino, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, breaking down all of the Sunday Week 7 action. We talked the NFC North battle, some great games, the Chiefs, the Eagles, but now we got to talk about that Sunday Night Football matchup. The entire world was telling Mike Tomlin that he should not bench Justin Fields. And Mike Tomlin, like the voodoo gypsy that he is, said, I am right and you are wrong. And the Pittsburgh Steelers score over 30 back-to-back weeks. Russell Wilson was cooking. He got George Pickens back online. Pickens had 5 catches, 111 yards. Najee Harris goes for 102 yards and a touchdown. Look, I think that Justin Fields deserved the opportunity to keep starting. But who am I to tell Mike Tomlin what to do with his football team? Clearly, everybody was wrong. And Russell Wilson had a tough start, but really kicked it in gear. And man, if the Steelers can keep that up with their defense, they might have something here.
I don't think any of us have any right telling Mike Tomlin, the longest tenured NFL head coach, what to do. And he's been in these situations where he's been told that he's wrong and he's done the opposite how many times now over nearly 2 decades. And you just sometimes as a coach, you just have to trust your intuition. And man, oh man, was it the right move? I could not believe the Russell Wilson that I was seeing, even the George Pickens that I was seeing. I live here in Denver, and that guy who was playing in the elevation last year was not the same guy that was playing tonight in that stadium. For the first time all year, the Pittsburgh Steelers had a downfield passing game. Like they were able to actually push the ball downfield. Russell Wilson still throws a beautiful ball. George Pickens is an unbelievable 50-50 ball catcher. He was just putting up the little boy symbol all night long, just manhandling guys out there. But that defense, Ty, like you talk about a Super Bowl caliber unit already. And now their offense is clicking and their special teams unit might be one of the best in the NFL right now. Watch out, man. In a division where everybody's saying Baltimore, you got to worry about Cincinnati. Watch out for Pittsburgh. That's a team that if they can somehow find a way to squeak through in one playoff game, I would not want to play that defense in some sort of championship environment. That is too tough with too many good pass rushers. Their secondary is starting to click. And if Russell Wilson plays like this version of Russell Wilson, the sky really is the limit for this Pittsburgh team. They were held back by Kenny Pickett last year and the couple of years before that. Justin Fields got them to where they needed to be to stay afloat. But maybe this is one of the first times we see like a long-term reliever come in the middle of a season that happens to have won multiple Super Bowls, being Russell Wilson. And this is a no-lose situation for them at the end of the day. It's like if Russ came in and was terrible, we could have just went back to Justin Fields. But he comes in and now Tomlin looks like the smartest guy in the room. So who's to say that these coaches may or may not know what they're doing?
Man, and look at all the players that they have on defense. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr. as a lockdown corner. Then you have Alex Highsmith back on the field with TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, of course. And then Patrick Queen. And look, Peyton Wilson, medical concerns coming out of college, but a guy with great range, great ability, 10 tackles in this game. And even Beanie Bishop had 2 interceptions. It's like, I said it on Twitter, when you play for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, the moment you put on the uniform, it's like you took super soldier serum. It's like you just freak out and become the best version of yourself. It's unbelievable the aura that this organization seems to have year in and year out. And a lot of it has to do with Mike Tomlin. But on the other side, man, where do the New York Jets go from here? They're 2-5. Their season's basically over. They traded for Davante Adams. They have an easy schedule coming up, but 2-5 is quite the hole to try to dig out of. There's nobody else to – I said it when they fired Robert Saleh. That was not the right move. You should have fired your offensive coaching staff. Todd Downing is not a good offensive coordinator, historically bad guy in the second half, and we're seeing that play out. Nathaniel Hackett was right to demote him, but like just because you demote Nathaniel Hackett doesn't mean that the offense is being coached well. You can add Aaron Rodgers' best friend all you want, but he had Davante Adams had 3 targets or 2 targets in the second half. Garrett Wilson is dropping the football off his chest and turning it into interceptions. Like the mojo is just completely off in New York. And it's crazy because they're worse right now statistically than they were last year at this time without Aaron Rodgers. It's just there's something in the water there. There's poison in the well. And my guy, John B. from Locked On Jets, talked about exactly that.
The Jets are a bad football team. It's as simple as that. I'm John, the host of Locked On Jets, and the New York Jets fell to 2-5 on Sunday night in an embarrassing 37-15 loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, a game that was frustrating for so many reasons. Maybe the biggest reason is that the Jets dominated the first 2 quarters. They led by 9 points with 1:15 left in the first half. Then Aaron Rodgers threw a brutal interception. The Steelers scored a touchdown before the half and completely took control of the game in the second half. Bad football teams find ways to get blown out even when they dominate the first 2 quarters. Davante Adams, a complete non-factor, only 3 catches for 30 yards and no catches in the second half. There's nothing else you can say. This team stinks right now. For more on the Jets, tune into Locked On Jets tomorrow. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This team stinks right now. I think that's a pretty good way to sum it up.
This is just another one of the examples that proves that this is not the NBA. This is not a league where you just get names and you win championships, especially against a team like Pittsburgh, who you talk about their offense. Yeah, Russell Wilson's a shell of himself, but where are the names there? Najee Harris is not the player he was a couple of years ago. George Pickens is still trying to figure it out. They have a bruised and battered offensive line as well. But the coach gets them ready to play. They had a great game plan. They knew exactly what to do. They knew that the Jets were going to go heavy in the pass game after acquiring Davante Adams, and Pittsburgh did exactly what Pittsburgh does and forced multiple turnovers. This Jets team, 12 hours before that, I was watching the Patriots, and I walked away from the day thinking the Patriots probably have a better future right now than the New York Jets do.
The New York Jets don't have a soul, man. And football is as close, like out of all the team sports, football is the closest thing to militaristic. Like you really got to play for your brother. You really got to care about the guy next to you. You really got to want to do your job. And if you don't have that DNA, that fabric of personality, then you're going to crumble in big moments. And I think that it starts with Aaron Rodgers, who is historically a selfish guy. And when he's making all the decisions, whether it's true or not, I'm sure there are teammates in that locker room who feel like, hey, they're catering to Aaron Rodgers. It's all about him, what he wants, blah, blah, blah. And it just doesn't, again, they just play like a team without a soul. I don't know how else to explain it other than that. But with that being said, that is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On NFL. Make sure that you tune into the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins, the barber himself, and step into the barbershop as he continues to chop up a great weekend in the NFL. We got some Monday night games that we're going to be reacting to on tomorrow's show. Can't wait for that. But for my fantastic co-host, Gino Camilleri, I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland. And as I tell you guys every episode, stay safe out there.